The room was buzzing. Cameras clicked. Reporters murmured. Stafars shuffled papers nervously. And at the center of it all, Senator John Kennedy stood, calm but alert, as if he knew something everyone else didn't. Today wasn't just another press briefing. Something unprecedented was about to happen. Something that would leave everyone in the room completely silent. It all started when a confidential report landed on Kennedy's desk earlier that morning. A report filled with facts, figures, and quotes information that, if read aloud, had the power to shift conversations, change perceptions, and for a moment, put politics aside. Most senators glance at reports, skim the executive summary, and move on. But Kennedy had a habit. He read every line, every footnote, every detail. And today, he had found a passage that demanded attention. By the time the press conference began, the room was packed. Reporters from every major network, interns nervously clutching notebooks, aides adjusting microphones. Everyone expected the usual political speech. A predictable routine of talking points and carefully scripted answers. But Kennedy didn't reach for his prepared notes. Instead, he held up the report, his eyes scanning the pages with a mix of determination and subtle amusement. As if he were about to reveal a secret everyone was supposed to know, but hadn't. And then he began to speak. At this point, it seems many in this room have misunderstood the data, he said, his voice steady, but carrying just enough edge to grab attention. So I'm going to read directly from the report itself, word for word. The room's energy shifted immediately. Reporters exchanged quick glances. Cameras zoomed in. Even the aides froze mid-step. There's something different when a politician reads directly from the source. There's no spin, no rhetoric, no careful editing. Just the raw facts. And Kennedy's timing was impeccable. He cleared his throat, then began quoting the report. Each sentence landed like a carefully aimed arrow, puncturing assumptions and catching listeners off guard. The room grew quieter. With every word, people stopped typing, stopped whispering, stopped shuffling. Every eye was on him, every ear tuned in. Kennedy didn't just summarize. He delivered the report in a way that made its contents impossible to ignore. By the time he finished the first paragraph, the room was silent, not polite silence. Not the, oh, we're listening silence. But the kind of silence that comes when everyone knows they've been caught off guard, when the words they just heard demand reflection. When the weight of truth hangs in the air. Kennedy looked around the room. There was no smirk, no self-congratulation. Just a calm acknowledgement that he had done what few politicians dared. Let the facts speak for themselves. For a brief moment, the political posturing faded, replaced by something rare raw. Undeniable clarity. And just like that, the story had changed. What started as a routine briefing became a moment that reporters, staffers, and even rival politicians would talk about for weeks. Because in that room, Kennedy hadn't argued, persuaded, or debated. He had simply quoted the report hand. The silence said everything. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning. The first paragraph of that report was just the setup. What followed would challenge assumptions, provoke reactions, and trigger a chain of events that no one saw coming. But for now, in this instant, Kennedy had done something extraordinary, commanded attention with nothing more than the truth. The silence was deafening. Reporters, aides, and even rival politicians didn't know whether to clap, ask a question, or simply sit frozen. Kennedy's calm reading had done something unusual. It had removed the usual layers of political performance and left everyone staring at pure, unfiltered facts. It started subtly. One reporter's hand twitched over a microphone, ready to ask a question, but she stopped mid-motion. Another leaned forward, notebook forgotten, eyes wide. Even the seasoned press veterans, those who had seen decades of political theater, felt a jolt. This wasn't a speech. This was truth in motion, and truth has a way of demanding attention. Kennedy didn't pause, continued quoting each sentence, landing precisely where it should. The room had a rhythm now, not of conversation, but of realization. Some people nodded slowly, digesting the implications. Others frowned, clearly unsettled. One aide whispered to another, almost inaudibly, "Did he just?" The second aide simply shook their head, unable to find words. Outside the press conference room, cameras were broadcasting live. Social media alerts began to ping. Tweets and posts captured fragments of the quote, each one igniting debates online. By now, it wasn't just the people in the room who were silent. It was thousands of viewers glued to their screens, experiencing the same shock. Kennedy's words were spreading faster than anyone could predict. And then came the subtle shift. Politicians in the room, who usually try to appear unshaken, began exchanging glances. The kind of glance that acknowledges, without saying a word, this could change everything. Some of them had been caught in positions they couldn't explain. Others realized that Kennedy's reading wasn't just information, it was a mirror held up to their own decisions, their own votes, their own statements. A hand finally rose. It was hesitant, almost cautious. The classic way reporters asked their first question. Kennedy didn't flinch. His eyes met the reporters, calm and unshakable. "Yes," he said, simply. No sarcasm, no deflection. It's just a quiet invitation. The question came, testing the edges of the report, but Kennedy didn't argue. He answered, with the report itself, quoting another section verbatim. Every quote reinforced the previous one. Every fact made it impossible to spin. The room's energy was shifting from curiosity to tension to a kind of awe. Why people weren't just listening, they were thinking, really thinking. One senior journalist, a veteran known for cutting through political hype, whispered under her breath, "He's doing something dangerous and brilliant." Dangerous because Kennedy had stripped away the filters that carefully curated talking points. It's brilliant because, in doing so, he had commanded authority without needing to raise his voice or attack anyone. As the minutes passed, the room's dynamic transformed. No longer a standard briefing, no longer a routine moment in the political calendar. It had become a stage where the facts themselves held power, and Kennedy. He remained the conductor, guiding attention, letting every word land with maximum impact. By the time Kennedy paused, a subtle tension had filled the air. It was the kind of tension that signals a turning point. Everyone present knew what had just happened wasn't merely a reading of a report. It was a masterclass in clarity and timing. And for some, the implications would be uncomfortable, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore as people adjusted in their seats. Still processing, Kennedy looked over the room with that trademark calm. The silence lingered for a few more heartbeats, then reporters began quietly murmuring, typing notes, framing their questions. But the energy had shifted. Kennedy had not only commanded attention, he had reshaped the conversation before anyone could even begin to challenge it, and somewhere in the back of the room, a rival politician exhaled sharply. Kennedy had just proven something that day. Facts, when presented without spin, have the power to silence, to shock, and sometimes to change everything. By the time Kennedy lowered the report, the room wasn't just quiet. It was tense. Every person present felt it. The weight of words carefully chosen, facts laid bare, and the unspoken reality that nothing would be the same after today. It wasn't anger exactly, nor excitement. It was the electric pause before a storm of reactions. Outside, the press conference room, the news had already started traveling. Social media accounts lit up with fragments of Kennedy's reading. Clips were shared, reshared, and dissected. Headlines flashed. Kennedy reads the report room silent, and Senator Kennedy breaks the internet with one reading. Minutes, the story went viral. Memes began to circulate, not mocking him, but highlighting the sheer audacity of his approach. Kennedy hadn't just spoken. It created a moment. Back inside, the ripple effect was even more tangible. Political aides whispered in corners, trying to anticipate the fallout. Journalists adjusted their framing, realizing that standard questions wouldn't suffice. A few senior correspondents hurriedly typed notes on laptops, already planning how to report what had just happened without sounding like they were exaggerating. The mood was no longer controlled by protocol. It was dictated by Kennedy's mastery of timing, presentation, and unassailable facts. Meanwhile, Kennedy's colleagues were processing the implications. Some were impressed, others defensive, and a few quietly furious. They had been in similar rooms countless times, delivering speeches, reading statements, and trying to guide the narrative. But Kennedy had bypassed all of that. He didn't just present information. He made it impossible for anyone to spin. For the first time that day, facts weren't negotiable, they were undeniable. One senior aide whispered, "He just set a new standard. No one can top this without looking ridiculous." Another, more skeptical, muttered, "This could backfire. People aren't used to honesty like this." But as they watched Kennedy calmly collect his papers, there was no sign of hesitation, no trace of doubt. He seemed to know something others didn't, or perhaps he simply trusted the power of the truth. Outside the room, analysts on live TV tried to unpack what had just occurred. "It's rare to see a politician read a report verbatim," one commentator said. "Usually there's spin, interpretation, framing, but Kennedy has forced everyone to confront the facts directly. The silence we witnessed, that wasn't just politeness, that was recognition." Viewers nodded, tweeted, and debated in real time. Clips of Kennedy's reading began trending across platforms. By the end of the hour, the story was everywhere, from political blogs to late-night talk shows. Meanwhile, inside the room, the dynamics were shifting again. Some reporters, finally finding their courage, began asking pointed questions. Kennedy answered, always calm, always precise, and always returning. To the report itself, there was no evasion, no misdirection. Every answer reinforced the power of facts over conjecture, clarity over opinion. The ripple effect wasn't just about media coverage or political attention, it was personal too. Senators and aides realized that Kennedy had quietly set a standard they couldn't ignore. Public perception, internal strategy, and political maneuvering all would now have to be measured against the undeniable truth he had just read aloud. And yet, Kennedy's demeanor never wavered. He didn't gloat, he didn't smile triumphantly, simply acknowledged the room, collected the report, and left the podium with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that a single, well-placed reading could echo far beyond the walls of any conference room. That day, one thing became clear. Kennedy had mastered more than rhetoric. He had mastered timing, precision, and the art of letting facts speak louder than words. The ripple effect was only just beginning, and by the time it reached the broader public, no one would be able to ignore it. By the afternoon, the ripple effect had become a wave. Clips of Kennedy quoting the report had gone viral across social media platforms. Hashtags praising his candor trended alongside threads analyzing every sentence he had read aloud. But with attention came scrutiny, and scrutiny inevitably brings backlash. Within political circles, reactions ranged from admiration to quiet alarm. Allies who had initially been impressed now whispered concerns behind closed doors. "He's brilliant. Yes, but reckless," one aide murmured to another. "This kind of exposure could backfire." There's no filter, no spin. Facts are powerful. So is perception. And perception can be unforgiving. Opponents wasted no time. Press releases, social media posts, and interviews were swiftly deployed, each attempting to reinterpret or challenge what Kennedy had said. Some accused him of grandstanding. Others claimed he had misrepresented the report, despite the fact that he had quoted it verbatim. The tension was no longer contained in the room. It had spilled into a public debate that threatened to dominate headlines for days. Meanwhile, reporters continued to probe. Questions became sharper, more pointed, and occasionally confrontational. "Senator, do you realize the political implications of reading this report in this manner?" one asked. Kennedy responded with the same calm precision that had defined the morning. "The implications are clear in the report itself," he said. "The facts don't need interpretation. They speak for themselves." It was a bold approach, and it was starting to rattle more than a few people. Politicians who were used to managing narratives, controlling sound bites, and filtering messages found themselves momentarily powerless. Kennedy had taken the strategy of careful phrasing and spun it on its head. By giving the audience direct access to the evidence, he had removed the usual tools of political influence. Social media users were divided. Supporters praised Kennedy for transparency and integrity, calling him a rare politician who dared to let truth take center stage. Critics, however, accused him of theatrics, claiming that reading a report aloud was nothing more than a publicity stunt. But the beauty of the moment and the source of its power was that Kennedy had left little room for argument. Facts once spoken aloud are difficult to dispute. Even senior journalists found themselves reflecting on the event. One veteran correspondent admitted, "I've seen speeches, debates, and press conferences. I've never seen a room go silent like that before." Kennedy didn't argue. He didn't embellish. He let the report do the talking, and it was electrifying. Day's events also sparked a private storm behind closed doors. Senior aides scrambled to anticipate public reaction. Legal teams reviewed statements, and communications departments drafted responses for potential fallout. Kennedy, however, remained unflustered. Where others saw chaos, he saw clarity. Where others saw potential missteps, he saw an opportunity to shift the conversation toward accountability, facts, and transparency. By evening, the story had become the top headline across multiple networks. Political analysts debated the significance of Kennedy's approach. Social media discussions were trending in real time, and in homes, offices, and online communities. People were discussing something rare in politics: the undeniable power of truth presented with authority. One thing was certain: Kennedy had ignited a fire that could not be easily contained. The backlash was real, and it was loud, but so was the momentum he had created. As the day drew to a close, the silence from the morning seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a charged environment buzzing with reaction, interpretation. Kennedy had started a chain reaction, one that would challenge perceptions, provoke discussions, and ultimately define the conversation for weeks to come. The morning's quiet shock was over. The evening's storm was only beginning. The morning's silence had long faded, replaced by a flurry of reactions, debates, and political maneuvering. Kennedy's simple act of reading the report aloud had grown into a storm, and the stakes were higher than anyone could have anticipated. By now, the event was no longer just a press conference. It had become a defining moment, one that tested the balance of power, public perception, and political strategy. Inside the Capitol, colleagues whispered in hallways, their conversations filled with both admiration and unease. Some recognized the brilliance. Kennedy had forced attention on facts that many wanted to gloss over or spin. Others saw danger. Those same facts could be wielded against them, exposing contradictions, missteps, or uncomfortable truths. The question on everyone's mind was simple: how would this play out in the public eye? Meanwhile, media outlets were dissecting Kennedy's every word. Analysts debated the implications of quoting the report verbatim. Political commentators speculated on the possible impact for upcoming votes and legislative battles. Social media users created threads that ranged from admiration to outright mockery. But even those attempting to criticize had to acknowledge the undeniable clarity of his approach. Kennedy had created a rare situation where facts spoke louder than interpretation, and people couldn't ignore it. Political rivals began to act. Some tried to deflect attention by issuing statements about unrelated topics. Others attempted to frame Kennedy's reading as a calculated publicity stunt. The more they tried, the clearer it became. The public wasn't responding to spin, it was responding to truth. Every attempt to divert attention only strengthened Kennedy's position. Highlighting the contrast between unfiltered facts and conventional political messaging, public reaction was equally intense. Town halls, social media comments, and phone calls to offices reflected a mix of shock, intrigue, and respect. Many voters expressed appreciation for Kennedy's directness, praising him for refusing to let the truth be diluted or ignored. Others worried about the political implications, questioning how such transparency could be navigated in a world often dominated by narratives and sound bites. But whether positive or negative, everyone was talking, and that was precisely the point. In the background, aides and strategists were scrambling to anticipate what came next. Senior staffers debated whether to release additional excerpts from the report, fearing both the power and the potential consequences of giving the public more information. Kennedy, however, remained calm. He didn't rush decisions or respond to every provocation. Instead, he focused on one thing: letting the facts do the work, knowing that the truth has a way of gaining traction on its own. By the end of the day, the event had become a defining narrative. Kennedy's reading of the report wasn't just news, it was a moment that reframed discussions, challenged assumptions, forced both politicians and the public to confront reality. The silence of the morning had been replaced by a charged atmosphere, one where the power of facts had rewritten expectations and set the stage for the battles to come. And Kennedy. He walked away from the podium with the quiet confidence of someone who had just altered the conversation. No fanfare, no dramatic gestures, just a calm acknowledgement that sometimes all it takes is truth delivered at the right moment to change everything. Little did anyone know, following days would push these stakes even higher. Reactions would intensify, alliances would be tested, and the public debate would grow louder. But for now, Kennedy had established one undeniable fact: in the right hands. A report simply read aloud could hold more power than any speech, strategy, or political maneuver. By now, Kennedy's reading of the report had become more than a political moment. It was a cultural phenomenon. News networks ran continuous coverage, highlighting clips of the senator quoting the report verbatim. Social media was ablaze with reactions, threads analyzing every line, videos dissecting his tone, and users debating the implications with unprecedented intensity. The story had transcended politics. It had entered the public consciousness. Public figures could no longer ignore it. Influencers, commentators, and activists weighed in, amplifying the conversation across platforms. Some praised Kennedy's bravery, celebrating a rare example of a politician who let facts speak louder than spin. Others were critical, framing the moment as a calculated performance designed to dominate media coverage. Yet even critics couldn't deny the impact. The silence he had created earlier that morning had now rippled outward, reaching millions. Meanwhile, political opponents were scrambling. What began as private discussions within party offices had escalated to public statements. Senators and representatives tried to reinterpret the report, claiming different interpretations or emphasizing minor details.
But
Kennedy had anticipated this. His calm, precise reading had left little room for manipulation. The facts, once spoken aloud, had gained authority that was hard to challenge. Town halls and public forums became battlegrounds for the debate. Constituents called offices, discussing what they had seen and heard. Supporters praised Kennedy's integrity and clarity. Critics worried about the political fallout, questioning whether such unfiltered transparency could be sustained without risk. Even everyday citizens, far removed from the halls of power, were discussing the report's contents and Kennedy's approach, proof that the impact was widespread and real. Media analysts attempted to quantify the effect. Engagement metrics, trending hashtags, and online sentiment analyses all pointed to one conclusion: Kennedy had dominated the conversation. More importantly, he had controlled the narrative without issuing a single attack or using political spin. This was new territory. For decades, politicians had relied on rhetoric, slogans, and carefully framed talking points. Kennedy had achieved more by simply quoting the source. Back in the political arena, senior figures were forced to respond. Interviews, op-eds, and press statements attempted to counter or clarify points raised in the report. Yet the public's attention had shifted. People were no longer focused solely on the interpretations of political figures, they were engaging with the facts themselves. Kennedy had leveled the playing field, shifting the debate from opinion to evidence, even as the day turned to evening. The momentum showed no signs of slowing. Memes and commentary flooded social media, creating a feedback loop that amplified awareness. Kennedy's measured delivery was praised repeatedly. His refusal to over-explain or embellish became a case study in precision and timing. Analysts commented that this was the kind of political moment that could influence public opinion long after the initial event had passed. And Kennedy himself remained calm. Unlike the swirling chaos around him, he seemed grounded in one simple truth: clarity and preparation can outshine theatrics, spin, and rhetoric. He had started a conversation that could not be ignored, and in doing so, he had demonstrated the power of facts when wielded with authority. The stage was set for what would come next. Public debate had exploded. Political opponents were scrambling. The media cycle had accelerated to a pace few could match. Kennedy. He had become the center of a discussion that would shape perception, influence decisions, and force accountability in ways no speech or press release could achieve. The silence of the morning had long been replaced by a roar, but Kennedy had orchestrated it with precision, proving that sometimes the simplest approach, truth spoken aloud, can have the most profound impact. Days passed, but the reverberations of Kennedy's reading refused to fade. What began as a single moment in a press conference had grown into a lasting story, shaping conversations across political offices, newsrooms, and social media feeds. The silence he created that morning had evolved into a dialogue defined by facts, clarity, and accountability. Political analysts reflected on the event with awe. "This was a rare moment in politics," one commentator said. "Rarely does a single reading of a report command attention like this." Kennedy didn't need theatrics, attacks, or speeches. He simply let the truth speak, and it spoke volumes. For many, it was a reminder that substance could still eclipse style. Preparation could outmatch spin. The public continued to engage. Town halls, online forums, and social media discussions dissected the report and Kennedy's delivery. People were not only talking about politics, they were engaging with information, thinking critically, and questioning narratives. Kennedy had shifted the public's perspective, turning a routine report into a tool for accountability. Even within the Capitol, the impact was undeniable. Colleagues who had initially viewed Kennedy's actions with skepticism found themselves reconsidering strategies, questioning decisions, and reflecting on the power of transparency. Some rival politicians, forced to confront the facts, adapted their messaging to remain credible. Kennedy had subtly reshaped the political landscape, not through confrontation, but through precision and authority. Meanwhile, journalists documented the moment as a turning point. Articles highlighted how the senator's approach bypassed traditional political tactics and emphasized clarity over spin. Media outlets replayed clips of Kennedy reading the report, often noting the silence that followed, an instant of collective realization and respect. That silence, simple yet profound, had become a defining symbol of integrity in a world often dominated by rhetoric. In the weeks that followed, Kennedy's actions inspired others, lawmakers, activists, and even students studying political science. Reference to the moment is an example of effective communication, demonstrating how preparation, clarity, and a commitment to truth can create impact. The story was studied, debated, and shared, becoming a case study in how facts, presented strategically, can resonate far beyond a single room. Yet for Kennedy, it was never about accolades. He didn't seek praise or viral attention. The goal had always been clear: to highlight the report, ensure the facts were heard, and provoke thoughtful discussion. By doing so, he reminded everyone, politicians, media, and citizens alike, that truth, delivered without spin, has unparalleled power. Looking back, the morning silence remained iconic. It symbolized the moment when a single act, treating the report aloud, shifted the narrative, commanded attention, and left an indelible mark on everyone present. That silence, now etched into memory, became a benchmark for honesty, clarity, and accountability in public discourse. In the end, Kennedy had achieved something extraordinary, transformed a routine briefing into a historic moment. Facts, clarity, and timing had combined to create an impact that resonated far beyond the room, the cameras, or even the news cycle. The room had been silent once, but its echoes would last for a long time. Kennedy had proven one timeless lesson. Sometimes, it's not the loudest voice, the most dramatic gestures, or the cleverest spin that matters. It's the truth spoken at the right moment that can command attention, earn respect, and change the conversation forever.